From the
I don't know what to say. I'm just speechless.
to the
I can't believe it.
we see all sorts of life-changing moments at McKinney Competitions. How would you react? Cars, houses, tech bundles and more from just £2 a ticket. No purchase necessary. For competitions, rules and conditions, see mckinneycompetitions.com.
People will buy in, but you'll have an element you'll have the good, the bad and the ugly.
Yeah, as you were saying earlier.
And the good will be amazing, and the bad might do it sometimes, and the ugly just won't do it at all. It's really exciting, and it feels a wee bit sometimes like standing on a beach with the water's constantly moving the sand under your feet. But that creates an excitement in a business because that means it's always on the move, it's always on the change. But I even relate it back to Alan MacArthur, the MacArthur Foundation. Alan wrote a road across the Atlantic Ocean, I believe, and she seen a lot of plastic in the centre of the ocean. When she came back, she said she's going to do something about it. So I think she's been somebody in the background that's actually made it come to the fore. I'm really excited to get nominated, and it's a really brilliant alumni in Ernst & Young and the Entrepreneur of the Year. So there's 24 finalists, and we're all on a call, and we met each other and we had a 90-second sort of tell all about the business. I don't know how I could say everything to say in 90 seconds, but
That was the voice of Joseph Doherty, co-founder and managing director of Regen Waste. And this is your host, Elaine Ingram. Joseph was recently nominated for the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award, and the following podcast will tell you just why. The family-run business, which began in 2004, is trailblazing across the globe with exciting new ideas and products that Joseph plans to lead Northern Ireland to zero landfill waste. And when you listen to him speak, he's pretty convincing that it will happen. Regen has been leading the way with waste management, and they continue to create hundreds of jobs in the locality. So let's hear from Joseph now. Hi Joseph, nice to meet you. I'm Elaine. I'm here surrounded by information about the company Regen. You've been going for 17 years. But it's not something that's been done in your family for generations. So first of all, I suppose I'd just like to know how the whole idea of, you're sitting in school one day and you think, I think I'll start up a waste management business. Or how does that even happen when something is not in a family for generations and stuff like that?
Well, I suppose it started with a brother of mine travelling to Canada. And he got the chance to go to Canada to study for a year through the University of Ulster. And when he was there, recycling was top of everybody's agenda. The Canadians, I think they were maybe about a decade or 2 decades ahead. So you're talking probably mid-90s. He was in Canada.
I was in Canada, and then it was very clean. I did notice that.
Yeah, well, that would have been, they would have been recycling at that point. And I think travel for him, seeing that, is what give. So when he would have been only in his early 20s then, probably at that point I was only probably about 17, but he come back from Canada, and probably a mix of him being in Canada and seeing that, and then also my father having a construction business, and generally business was something we grew up with.
Yeah. He
would have grew his business from building one-off houses in the country to he built housing developments. Done his first housing development. I was only 14 in Bestbrook, 66 houses. Never forget it. So that was what we would have learned about business, and then that piece coming in of that knowledge from travel, which I think led to the growth of the business and the ability to find something that was niche, something new. So we weren't going into a business that was competing against anybody else. Nobody else had blue bins out. Northern Ireland was on a path to put a blue bin to every household over from, let's say, 2004 right up until 2010-11, before I think every household had a blue bin. So we were growing a business at the same time as the demand was growing.
Yeah.
So, and we had no competitors. There was only a few competitors. So it was all to play for.
Yeah. It was
and
a completely open market, ready and waiting for you there.
Yes.
Yeah. And do you think, do you think initially people bought into this whole, the whole idea of recycling? Or do you think people were, becoming more environmentally aware, and maybe because, as you said, like your brother being in Canada, the globalization, the world is becoming smaller with the internet and everything, that people are, we're starting to see that other places were doing this, and it just became a thing that became popular in Ireland?
Yeah, look, I think we can see Plastics Ocean has driven a lot only in the later days, but in the early days, I would say you split your people into the good, the bad and the ugly. The good being the ones that wash out their bottles and all them things, and the ones that maybe will just about get it to the bin, and then there's the ones don't care what bin it's in.
Probably generational too, maybe. Although, having said that, I was thinking, maybe older people kind of going, oh, this is a load of nonsense. But at the same time, when you think about it, a lot of the stuff, disposable packaging and everything only came in more recent years. So the older generations would have been doing that as a natural thing anyway. They wouldn't have been using as much waste, as much plastic and stuff like that. So,
well, I think probably the older generations, so my parents, would have lived in a time where there wouldn't have been a bin at a household to start with. So everything there's probably very little packaging. The packaging would have been reused at the household for something else. But as time would have developed on, we've become a consumer society where we consume and demand and create this waste. And so you've seen that amount of waste increase. And so then they had to put in systems to collect that and take that back into reuse and make use of them raw materials. So you're seeing that we're seeing this ever-changing shift from people reducing their impact on the earth. And this is a step. This is one step in the direction. This isn't the perfect step. The perfect step is to reuse everything. The perfect step is for you to have glass jars at your house for all foods and take them to the shop every day and lift the materials.
It used to be like that. You used to return bottles and everything. It used to be a lot less.
And in some ways it could go back to that. I think that you're seeing full circle. And us as a waste management company can't think that that's always going to be the way. We can't think that there's always going to be waste produced at the household. You will see reduction in your black bin being collected. Councils are going to have to try and force people to reduce the residual, and that'll increase recycling. But I think you'll also see, maybe not in this decade or the next, but you'll see shops then trying to reduce the packaging. You might see actually people, like a reusable bag, you might see reusable boxes taking your cereals home. That's probably the ultimate. We're not there, and as a society we culturally need to change, and you don't change a society culturally that easy. So it's a step at a time, but you will see paradigm shifts, and the biggest paradigm shift for me would have been the Plastics Ocean, and that has drove people's want and desires, but that has to translate through into people prepared to take the cost and take changes in their lives to make them changes, which I think still has a part way to go.
Yeah, because you feel at times like you're just running around in circles, because people are more aware and people are trying to recycle and trying to do the right thing, but at the same time they're buying more. And where does the responsibility lie in that? Because you go into a supermarket, and I know there's been campaigns to try and, in fruit and vegetables and things like that, where they try and package things, have less packaging, and sell things loose without packaging and stuff like that. But it just seems that there's so much, there is so much packaging on products, and
the government has been taking steps. Now, big brands have been taking steps as well, but I think you have to look at the life cycle analysis of products. And this is where you have to get into the detail. Sometimes it's better to have a lot of packaging on something to preserve the product to the householder and maybe increase the use-by date, so that means that you can have it on your shelf longer. So there's a constant battle between the energy used to create the packaging against the energy used to create the food. And if the food lasts another 7-10 days, well then that in a sense saves energy, because that person would waste that food less. So there's a whole discussion, and sometimes we have to be careful, and we have to make sure the government educates people well enough that whenever they make a decision to remove packaging, that they're not causing an unintended consequence somewhere else. That unintended consequence might be if there was a plastic bag around grapes, and maybe them grapes might go off quicker if that bag wasn't, or they might get damaged, or it's not maybe a perfect example, but it's an example of where did the energy that it took to grow that grape and handle it and get it to the shopper Was that more or was that less than the plastic packaging that protected it for longer? So I'm not an expert on it, but there's a whole discussion to be had, and people need educated rather than just going no to plastic or no to raw materials. Them raw materials actually might be better for the environment than not good for the environment.
Yeah, and there's also been the question of the amount of energy that it takes to actually recycle all the stuff that is that counterproductive. But for your business, tell us about the business itself, that you're able to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, well, probably the key thing about recycling, yes, there's certain products within the recycling bin which are massive amounts of saving in energy, and the biggest one would be aluminium. The energy taken to remove aluminium out of its raw material in the ground is probably massive, and that there's a massive saving. Plastic also, from a carbon point of view, also is a big saving as well. So that's where the recycling really wins, and that energy saving is what's key important. Now, but the business in general, we have with two parts of the business. We have the recycling plant, which is your blue bin, which is your paper, card, plastic bottles, steel, aluminium, and in recent years we've added glass. That adding glass has left it more convenient, but also we had to adopt the plant, and so we create a mixed glass product that we then send out to another company to sort, to then reuse back into bottles again. So there's a lot of technology involved, and that technology development has been happening over the last number of years and will continually improve and will continually get better, because it isn't a black and white, it's continual improvement. Our industry, from coming from not being there 17 years ago to now being quite central to, even in the pandemic, we were central to delivering paper to Armagh in Lurgan to make new egg cartons, because some of the commercial outlets that they were depending on weren't there because they weren't producing the waste products to deliver the back for the earth. So we were able to increase the amount of tonnage we sent them, and that we were able to do that. So you have to realise how waste is a complex part of the whole supply chain, and food to get back in the shelves, especially in Armagh's case, supplying the egg cartons back into the shops to get food to people. It was one of the basic things. So during the pandemic, collecting waste off the streets, you could have a far worse than a pandemic if you didn't collect waste in the streets with the disease and problems. So general sanitation, but on the other side, it was producing that raw material. So that's circular in itself, and that shows how the circularity was so heavily dependent on in those key times. And then, suppose if we split the business, then you've got the mixed waste business. So your black bin at the moment, that's being treated in another part of the business in Uri, and we remove any recyclables that we can, and then we produce a fuel, and that fuel then goes to be burned to make energy. So that's the two sides of the business.
So how did that, that must have been, taken an awful lot of, scientific engineering and everything to come up with these ideas. How did that come about in your business? You started off obviously just, small, and you've grown so much, in terms of everything that you do now.
Well, it starts with conversations, starts with talking to people, it starts with travelling and going and seeing where others are at. It starts with all those things to come back to create a combination of what's the council, our local councils demand that we treat the material. So we had to come up with solutions, and so we have to go out and meet. And in a lot of cases that means going to maybe countries that are ahead and seeing what them countries are doing, and then bringing those ideas back. And so that's how you have to go, and you couldn't talk to enough people and you couldn't learn from enough people to be able to come back to make sure you don't make the mistakes that they made. And so that's where we have to invest the time. And probably in the early days I would have been more operational. Now I spend a lot of time talking to people and trying to grow the business more and be ahead of the curve and be ready for what's next needed for changes in what society will demand.
And what do you think is next needed at the moment? What's the next step in the, where you think we're going, or what's, where we are?
Well, in the next 5 years, there's been 2 consultations out by the government, and I just recently got on a government advisory committee on packaging to support these consultations and make sure that we as a company are shaping the rules of the future so that we can make sure that we as a company keep ahead, but also that we're meeting the requirements. So that operational ability, but these two consultations that we've responded to lately will make big changes. One of them was the deposit return scheme, which is, you'd remember, maybe you used to leave a glass bottle back into the shop and you got 5 or 10p. We're now going back to that, but it's not going to be a reusable bottle. It'll be that plastic bottle. You'll pay the deposit when you buy it in the shop.
Right.
And when you bring it back to a reverse vending machine, that will pay you your 10p or your 5p back. That still has to be set. And so the government's gone down that road. But also, what doesn't go into the deposit scheme, so in that deposit scheme you would have plastic bottles, PET bottles, drink bottles, your glass bottles, and your aluminium cans. That's going to remove that from your recycling infrastructure. But the other change...
Will you not be able to put them in recycling anymore, or would you have to?
You'll be able to put it in recycling and we can take it, but you lose the deposit.
Okay, right.
And now, this still has to be ironed out, and that might not be the way they make them up with what they call a digital DRS, where you can read the code of the bottle and put it in your bin. But the government, from what I believe...
Seems like an awful lot of work for the consumer though, is it?
It probably is a lot of work, and this is where I think that people need to realise the ramifications of some of these things and the effect on the convenience of their lives, to being able to just put it in a recycling bin. If you have to gather up all your plastic bottles and take them back to a reverse vending machine, that's extra work for you.
Yeah.
And will you do it? And how much of a difference will it make? Depending on certain people, they will be very happy to do it and others won't.
Would they set them up in like shopping centres and have them in convenient places like that you could do it? Yes,
they will. It'll be mainly returned to shops, and you'll be able to... Some shops that aren't big enough for a machine will have to do either manual take back, and so they hand out the 10p, take the bottle back, and then they collect it in bags from those. Or reverse vending machines would be like the vending machine you see, only you put the bottle in instead of taking it out. That's the DRS is something that I've mixed emotions on DRS, because it's going to remove quite a valuable part of the recycling stream.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, it will increase the recycling, because not everybody, and there's a good chance it'll capture the people that don't recycle, because they'll maybe want that 5 or 10p or 20p, whatever's put on the bottle.
Well, it's kind of like the when the plastic bag charges came in the south, they, you had to pay for your bags. Well, you still do. They started it down there, and it came up here then after that.
That's right.
So some people say, oh well, it makes people reuse their bags, which is a positive. People got used to that very, very quickly. I mean, some people complained about it at the start, but I thought, it was kind of a no-brainer. This was a good thing. It would make people reuse their packaging unless they wanted to pay. If you want to pay for a bag, fine, pay for your bag. But and it keeps bags being thrown in hedges. Keeping the countryside clean and things like that. I think it was kind of. It doesn't take long. People don't take that long to adjust to things. They might kind of give out about stuff at the start, saying this is. Even when the blue bins and brown bins came in, everybody's like, "Oh God, I got to sort out all this stuff." But people buy into things fairly quickly, I think, and you just get used to it.
I think, look, people will buy in, but you'll have an element. You'll have the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, as you were saying earlier.
And the good will be amazing, and the bad might do it sometimes, and the ugly just won't do it at all.
Well, the thing I have to say though, it can be confusing. Not what you put in, but things like cleaning out stuff. If something is not cleaned properly and put in the blue bin, does that contaminate the whole bin?
No, it doesn't contaminate the whole bin, but it could mean more for me would be the picking operators on the lines getting materials where there's food traces on a food tray. That would be the sort of thing where then.
So what happens then?
In the case where it's not too contaminated, so it's slightly contaminated, we could still recycle that, and we could get it downgraded at a materials facility that would take in and melt that. But in most cases, most of the materials, it doesn't matter, because aluminium uses high temperature, steel uses high temperature, plastic the same, so they do wash those products. But also we would separate them into different types, so we might have to separate that into a different grade and sell that separate. So
you empty your blue bin into the truck, and is the stuff separated then?
Well, it's collected at the house or at the household by the truck. It's loaded into the truck. In Nuri's case, it comes back to the facility direct, so the bin lorry tips through our door, In the case of councils, we take material from Mid Ulster and Causeway Coast and Glens. That comes in one of their transfer stations. They load it in our truck. We take it back to our facility. You might see our trucks on the road, travelling from north down to Newry, and we sort that. It's tipped in the tipping hall. The tipping hall then is loaded onto the plant, and then the plant feeds through any contaminants that somebody puts in. So large contaminants, you could have a pair of shoes or a rug fired in that shouldn't be there, and that's not common, but it still happens. So we have people that picks that out. It runs through the machinery. Then it's quite homogeneous.
You actually have people who literally pick the things out.
Yes. If machines does.
That's what I was saying. I was wondering that, because machine can only do so much. You need to have eyes that can, you need to have people.
Well, funny enough, just now in sort of end of July, we'll have another addition to the recycling plant, which is another 10 optic sorts. Them 10 optic sorts will then do far more and sort to a far bigger number of grades. And so that's an investment we're taking, so that's a step for us. It's a 5 million investment is happening at the moment. So we hope that running and operational fully end of July.
Yeah. And then, just another thing I wanted to ask about the blue bins. A lot of times, now the lids break off really easily, and I know so many people whose bins have no lids on them, right? Including me. But I try and cover it up. But what happens then if it rains and the stuff gets wet? Is that...
It does. If the material gets wet, it can cause moisture issues. Now, we would have, when we sell materials, we sell them to people, they demand a certain moisture content, but we can't control the rain either. And we can't control... Now, we would hope the councils would ask them people to put their lids, or the councils go out and fix the lids for them.
There's so many bins with broken lids. You see them everywhere. The lids are just not made very well. And they must come off in the trucks when they're, when they're emptying them into the trucks, they must come off. I know this is nothing to do with you.
It's not something that we would deal with direct. Probably the material getting wet so new newspaper, but any collection receptacle, the material, if it's not handled right, the material can get wet. And I suppose the key thing is, if it gets wet then moisture can travel to other pieces of paper.
Yeah. So
that's probably, the more you can have lids on bins, the better. It would be better for us. It runs better in the recycling plant. But don't worry, it'll still be recycled. Okay. We'll make sure it's been recycled, but hopefully all the dry stuff makes up for the bit of wet that we get.
All right.
So,
I'm glad you told me that.
Yeah. Well, look, it's an advantage for us if they are covered. Yeah. But if everybody was coming in that wet, it maybe would leave it harder to recycle.
Yeah.
Get ready to shake up summer with the Get Active ABC Sunshine Fill programme for kids and families. Get set for land-based adventure at our summer schemes, or why not get adventurous and maybe get wet at our Splashtastic Water Sports Summer programme. There are so many things to do, and all we need is you. See getactiveabc.com/summer for all the details.
So for you now, for the business itself, I know you're doing really well. You were actually an Entrepreneurial Award. Tell us about the award.
It looked really interesting, really excited to get nominated. And it's a really brilliant alumni in Ernst & Young and the Entrepreneur of the Year. So there's 24 finalists and we're all on a call, and we met each other and we had a 90-second sort of tell all about the business. I don't know how I could say everything to say in 90 seconds, but so probably didn't get a lot from me, but really interesting, some really interesting businesses. And I think it's so amazing what does be happening. Some of the growth businesses that's happening is just amazing. Everything from beauty to brick manufacturers is on it. So there's a real broad range of businesses, and I'm really excited about the next few months, because there's a great plan of what to do with any of the 24 finalists, and the time to spend with them and interaction with our people. So really looking forward to that networking opportunity. And I don't know if I'm going to be fit to go against any of the other ones that's there, but they've got this far. Really happy with that. Well,
it's a that it's a huge thing, and it's a really, really brilliant achievement. But your business is so it's so the environmentally friendly part of the way the world is right now. You couldn't be more at the right place at the right time. and it must be very rewarding because you're doing something, you know, that's so positive. Do you find that rewarding in your work?
I do. Look, it's exciting to be part of something that's growing, something that's important to a lot of people, and there's a lot of interest. And we had an open day, it was 2 years ago, in the facility, and we had over 1,000 people come to see the facility, which was really brilliant for us on the team. Like, at the end of the day, you have to remember, I'm only talking on behalf of the other near 300 people that works in the business, and my family, or my brothers and sister, is all part of it. So I'm just the one that gets out and speaks, and but it's them that's doing all the hard work. I just do all the talking. So but yeah, it's really amazing business to be part of, and it's really exciting. And it feels a wee bit sometimes like standing on a beach with the water's constantly moving the sand under your feet. But that creates an excitement in a business, because that means it's always on the move, it's always on the change, and we need to be sharp enough to be ahead, both of our competitors, but also ahead of the change, because them's two things that we need to be. If we don't, we fall behind and we don't deliver.
Yeah, because that seems to be a theme with, you know, successful businesses, and any type of successful businesses is always like being ahead of the curve, and always like knowing what's out there and keeping your eye on, you know, new innovations and things that are coming on the market, and things that will help you in your business. But I mean, how big is the business now? I mean, what did you start off with, and what have you come to now in terms of your machinery and in terms of what you have?
Well, we started 17 years ago
Yeah.
with nothing. We had nothing, with no contract, with no people, we had no anything. So, you know, those days I was the only person there. My sister come to look along with me then after that, and then after
so
that.
So you were just in an office at that point, or had you got a warehouse? What way did you?
Well, we started actually with no warehouse, with no building. We had to start from scratch. Lucky we come from a construction background, so we knew how to do. We had the ability to build. If something processed material treatment was something that we had through the construction background, and we were able to then bring that over into the waste. But yeah, it started from here in these offices to then getting a site, and then from that then building the site, not knowing what we're going to put on it, and then taking it from not knowing what we put on it to something that we could make a business of. We were going to build a big building, and we didn't know what we were going to put in that big building, so I had to go away and talk to people, and that's the talking to people at the crossroads to check, to sort of find out what was needed, and that's when we come up with the blue bin and the recycling. So that was our first kick-off. We had a big plant built, and we had to go out and win contracts to fulfill that.
How hard was that when you're unknown? You know, well, I mean, you're known in your own industry, but how you're not known in that end of things, and because it was a new industry. So how hard of a sell was that, trying to get contracts? And you know,
it's very hard, because when you're a business starting off, nobody wants to. You're starting off with no track record, no background. Nobody wants to work with you. Only Newry Council. We were the closest. I think they had to drive a lot further to go to somebody else, so they took a chance on us. Once we got that first council contract,
I mean, if you got Newry Council, I mean, that's huge in itself. Then
it was a big tick in the box for any contract you would go after that, because you had a reference, and as long as we delivered and done well for Newry, which we did do, Newry was happy to then say, well, these guys are delivering for us, and then that's important for them. The rest of the councils could then do the same. And
what were the biggest challenges back then? Apart from getting your people to listen to you and see what you had to offer, what were the other challenges that were hard?
We didn't have the expertise in the business. When you're a business starting with no people, you have to do everything yourself. Yeah. And I would hate to look back at some of the work that I done, because at the end of the day I didn't have expertise in a lot of areas, whether it was tendering for council projects, but we got the business going, and then we were able to employ the right people, and then you got to a point where you're big enough to employ experts in different backgrounds, that then it left it easier and easier. So every time the business got bigger, you were able to bring in more expertise to leave it easier to run. So it's easier to run a business where you've got activity happening and experts in the room to help. But it's a lot harder whenever you're on your own, or it was just a family member.
You're trying to do everything, because and you're not experts in everything, obviously. So you need to get the experts in there.
We're experts at failing and everything. We learned. That's how we learned.
Well, so anybody in business will tell you that there's no such thing as failure. It's all learning, isn't it?
Well, yeah. Well, let's say we learned a lot then in the early days.
And how is it working with the family? And many of you have family. There's 3 or 4 brothers?
There's 3 of us as owners, myself, Aidan and Colin, but also I have another sister and brother works in the business. Celine works in product sales, and John works in the procurement team's tendering team, and so they're rocks in the business. They're important, but also there's a lot of staff that's come in the number of years, have been with us 10, 12, 15 years. So really we depend a lot on them, and they actually carry it a lot of ways now, whereas nearly they're better at them things than we are. So we have to step back and do what we're told at points. But that's good, because that means they're taking control, they're taking ownership, they're taking responsibility, and they're also delivering better than we could.
Yeah. But how was it working with your family members, and how was it in the early days? You know, was it all very, you know, everybody agree with everybody? And
what is it to say in football in the middle of a fight, a game broke out? You know, no, look, we need pull together.
You don't act like that when you know you're working with different colleagues, but when it's your family, you can people tend to be a bit more honest in their opinions.
But also honest, but also forgiving,
Yeah.
and you have to be forgiven, because at the end of the day, it is tough. It's tough to get it right, and it's quite high demand whenever it's your family, because everybody wants to do the best. And one thing I can be clear on, everybody on all the team, not even just the family, but they're all pushing the right direction. They are pushing the right direction for the business, and that's key.
And probably everybody has different skill sets to bring as well, you know, their own personalities and their own things that they bring to the business. Your family, not the experts that you brought in, I'm talking about the actual family members.
Yes, everybody's different. Everybody's got different skill sets, and you can see that, and that was key in the early days, because you were able to close off more of not having them experts when you had people that maybe had a skill set that could cover that.
Yeah.
And probably one of the things I think people don't need to come to work in our business with all the knowledge. They need to come with, if they come with enthusiasm, the energy, I think that, and that's the want to think and learn, I think they'll be successful working with us, because they think that we'll fill that gap. Because in the knowledge, people can change from job to job. It's the thinking and the energy that matters, not the exact knowledge in that business.
Yeah, and it's about being prepared to, you know, really like decide that you really want to be a part of it, and being there for the right reasons, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, and look, if somebody comes and doesn't want to be, we don't want them in the business either. Your colleagues don't want them. You have to be. Sometimes people don't enjoy certain businesses, and they're better being in the businesses that they would enjoy. So you have to have team members that all want to be pulling in the one direction, because one person pulling against this can be damaging. So you have to have your team all pulling in the right direction.
And how many have you got now working for you, did you say?
With 293 on last count about 3 weeks ago, and that was a big increase from, we had about 250 up until it was February, March time. A company like similar to ourselves went into administration in the northeast of England, and so when their councils was in trouble, they needed a quick solution, so we were able to deliver a quick solution to them councils. So we ended up, there's about 50 truckloads a week comes from the northeast of England back to Newry. That's a lot of jobs. There's 43 jobs on that work coming from England that's coming in that Northern Ireland didn't have. So we're bringing raw material back to Northern Ireland, we're bringing product, and we're bringing opportunity for us to develop some of the projects we want on the new Investment in Ireland site that we've planning permission for, to make products locally that we can sell locally. And so that's our big aim, to fulfill that circular economy that everybody's pushing for. Well, that's the steps we'd like to take. We have in R&D at the moment, we have a number of projects, one in paper, one in plastic, and one in glass. And they're part way there, but if we can complete, we'll be building a new site, and we'll be fulfilling them steps, which we believe will close the loop locally. So I can't say no more because we're still working in that space.
Yeah,
but
it sounds very exciting.
It is, and groundbreaking, and that's where we want our business to be. And we feel by doing that we'll be fulfilling what's needed, what the people want, and also what the policy and government's looking for as well, which is ultimately what the people want.
Yeah. Were you affected by Brexit at all in all of that? Like you're dealing with in England and stuff like that?
Brexit for us, Northern Ireland's been treated as a third state for certain rules between the EU and Northern Ireland. Now, what that translates through into, we would have what they call transfrontier shipment paperwork, which is quite onerous for shipping any recycle we take from the Republic of Ireland into Northern Ireland. But now in dealing with GB, we have to then follow that same paperwork. And that's quite an arduous process of up to 6 weeks. Costly
Yeah.
time. We'll have to employ a few people. So you're probably talking Brexit's adding 2 people, extra resources and trailers shipping over and back from England because you have to be in certain slots through customs paperwork, but also then this TFS paperwork as well. So it's an added dimension. But I think we're lucky that we're at a scale where we're able to handle, that we can employ people and we have enough volume to make it pay to be able to do it. But it leaves it a bit harder for us to go out and win work in England whenever, and in Scotland too, whenever we're having to go through this paperwork process. So it makes it feel like we're now a separate entity from the UK from a business point of view, and that leaves it harder to do business. And it's not been left any easier to do business with the Republic of Ireland either. So actually we don't win either way.
Yeah.
And that's the disappointing part is.
And what about COVID? Were you affected by that at all in any way? The business?
Well, at the start of COVID, we weren't sure what the government was going to say. We were sitting waiting on the government possibly to ask us to close, ask people to stay at home, and maybe they could have turned around and said landfill everything, so you reduce the number of people. Now, we then quickly realised, we weren't getting any guidance, but we quickly realised that we were being told, if you can operate, keep operating. But then we realised that Huhtamaki required more material, and so the general raw materials was needed back into society to fulfil the requirements.
Well, you were an essential service, pretty much, you were.
Yes,
Yeah.
we were an essential service, and it was. I have a lot of respect for the people that works in our facility, kept going every day, even though they didn't know what the risk was, what the hassle. We had to make changes. We done everything that we could. We had to set up a COVID committee, a team which had engineers, health and safety people, operation managers, all come together and design changes in the whole facility to make it safe for people. So the pickers and the picking lines had screens between them. We had deep cleaning between shifts. We had deep cleaning throughout at break times. We put in a system that controls who gets onto the site. We had temperature checks coming onto the site. We had hand sanitizers put right around the facility to make sure that people could access. We put up a tent, or probably maybe like a big wedding marquee in the site, and people were able to socially distance and have their lunch. So we've done a lot of changes. All the weighbridge then was isolated from the truck drivers coming in, so the paperwork didn't have to be handed across. So we reduced any touch points that we could see around the business, so people felt safe. I remember the mechanic saying, when he says, I feel safer here than do at home. So it was important that we had invested the time. But what I quickly come to realise is people weren't interacting, and we weren't allowed to allow them to interact, but people missed that interaction. So I think that there's still a toll to tell on that, and there's a bit of loss of team camaraderie because they can't get together. So I think that's something that hopefully we'll have to work on when things settle down. But keeping people safe was our number one priority. From a business operating point of view, tonnage stayed the same, actually increased because people were buying more products.
Yeah, I was thinking, definitely you would have more because people aren't. Although you wouldn't have. Well, I suppose it swings and roundabouts. Really, you would have more from households, but from businesses you'd have less because businesses were closed. So
you see, we're focused on households. So we had, you can laugh, but glass bottles increased nearly double.
Well, I can guess. We have plenty of wine bottles in there, I'm sure.
you can nearly tell it. But so in the first lockdown, there was an awful increase in glass, plastic, and aluminium cans to a lesser extent, but glass seemed to jump the most.
Right.
So you can interpolate what you think from that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So look, the tonnage increased. So we actually, I think we were so lucky to have a business that kept operating, and because I'd be so concerned about the businesses out there that didn't have that chance and have had to suffer through losses on overheads, close the doors, especially the hospitality sector. I think that it's been a very tough time for them, and hopefully they'll have their win now whenever things open up and people have all this money to spend. They'll hopefully spend it in those places and hopefully give them businesses money back to be able to maybe claw back what they lost over the last year.
They'll have to wait until they're ready to actually open again, because at the moment when they have only half capacity, it's very difficult to see how any of them are making any money, and places are half empty because of the restrictions that are still in place. But hopefully that will lift soon. But what about clothes and things like that? That type of material. Do you recycle stuff like that as well?
No, we don't recycle
You
clothes.
don't, yeah.
We did trials on it in the past where we had a washing machine and we washed the clothes, but the demand on the quality of clothes is so high that it wasn't something that we were able to deliver.
It's such a tricky one as well, because you see, and I was reading about this recently, sending clothes off to different countries, like clothes collections and stuff like that. They go off to Africa and places like that, and then their industries are being destroyed because they can't make their own. So everything is very intricate. I mean, there's ups and downs to everything. You think you're doing something good, you send them away and think that's doing the right thing, but as it turns out, that's not necessarily the right thing at all to do.
Well, I don't know a lot about the clothes sector. It would be something in the individual sector that they use bring banks and they collect from the bring banks. It wouldn't be usually something that would be encouraged in the recycling bin.
Yeah. And what about building materials? Do you ever get people that are putting things like that in that shouldn't be in there?
Oh, you do. You get the odd. You get, as I said, there's a few ugly, and you get ugly things in too. So, yeah, look, we have to deal with. But do you
think that people are getting better in general?
Yes, I do. I believe that they're caring more and they can see better quality coming all the time. And yeah, they definitely can see it.
And do you think education is key to that? People knowing, educating people on the importance of what you're doing? Yes,
I think you have to continually educate. If you can continually keep people, and I think the likes of the Blue Planet has been a big help in that, because people think, I need to do my bit. So it's that cultural change, and that cultural change it takes time, but it also takes big shifts, like people like David Attenborough telling people, look, this
absolutely incredible. Yeah, I mean, he's something else, isn't he?
Yeah, well, he's caused a paradigm shift, but I even relate it back to Ellen MacArthur. The MacArthur Foundation, Ellen would have rowed a rowboat across the Atlantic Ocean, I believe, and she's seen a lot of plastic in the centre of the ocean, and when she came back she said she's going to do something about it. So I think she's been somebody in the background that's actually made it come to the fore, and she's not recognised publicly for it, but I don't think that matters to her. I would say it's what raised it to give somebody like David Attenborough the platform on which to really shout about it, and she may have had something to do with it, but I know that Ellen MacArthur in the waste trade magazines, you would always see that it would have been her that set up, and she set up a whole foundation to drive the plastic pact around reducing single-use plastic. So it's come very much on the back of the likes of her that has, in sport, has been very strong, and now she's bringing that to the Save the World.
Yeah. So when do you hear about this award? Do you know when you'll hear anything?
I think from what I got now, there's we've met a number of times, and I think we meet the judges in September, November time, and you get a decision quickly after that.
Yeah.
So yeah, look, I'll put my best foot forward, but with the competition being so stiff, I'll not hold out any thoughts of maybe winning it. I think I'm just glad to get to where I got to and to meet the people that are getting to meet. So that's the
and it's
the
a
best
recognition, and it's a recognition anyway. To be nominated is a huge thing. But hopefully now you'll do well in it.
Hopefully, but I have to remember it's my team as well. It's not just me. I'm just fronting it for all of them. Yeah. So I just do the talking. They do all the real work.
And the amount of people that you've employed locally and everywhere, it's just, it's all good.
Look, it's great to be able to add something to the local area. Yeah. So we just like to do our bit.
Okay. Thanks very much, Joseph. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed listening to that. And got lots of ideas about recycling. It really does just go to show that we are all cogs in the wheel when it comes to creating a better world. Make sure to keep getting all of your news from Armagh I, and I hope you join us next time for our podcast.
From the
I don't know what to say. I'm just speechless.
to the
I can't believe it.
We see all sorts of life-changing moments at McKinney Competitions. How would you react? Cars, houses, tech bundles and more from just £2 a ticket. No purchase necessary. For competitions, rules and conditions, see mckinneycompetitions.com.